Hello, my dear friend. Today I will delight you with 9 scary stories based on real events. We're starting. Hi. I'll start perhaps with the main thing. I rarely talked to the boy from the next door. I hardly talked. If only in one sandbox in early childhood. We were very different. I am a closed person who appreciates friendship. He is a free wind, the soul of the company. I didn't pay attention to him, but that's it. I often saw him in the company of friends, always smiling, always surrounded. However, at the age of 13 to 14, I stopped seeing Glory. That was his name. Sometimes I met him. Very rarely, when I returned from school, he looked out the window. I started to wonder, why did he become lonely? What's going on with him anyway? I found his account on a social network. And since I am a shy person, I decided to start communicating with him in a social network. I was just afraid to approach him, but I felt that I wanted to be friends with him. Surprisingly, he turned out to be a very interesting person. Literally a month later, we became very close people and lived only with each other. We walked together, just talked. One day I asked him why he stopped communicating with the old company. Why is he talking to me? Slavka didn't say anything. I figured I'd ask him about it later. I often resented him for not trusting me with his secrets. I suspected him of something. I was jealous of everything alive. I thought we had the same friendship for life. We complemented each other perfectly. One day he refused to walk with me. I started a scandal. I was offended all week, but he wrote to me online every day, reassured me that it was necessary. It was getting more frequent. We were moving away. I could feel it. But I realized that I couldn't do without him and decided to talk to him. I came to his house. He was lying down. I thought I was sick and asked him about it. He shook his head negatively, but he immediately burst into tears. I hugged him. He said, "Tell me what happened." Slava told me about himself for a long time, about his past and present. Yes, I was right. He was sick, but not with a cold. He was diagnosed with cancer. Slava had been living with this for several months, and this was the reason for his subsequent isolation. I held on, but as soon as I left the house, I started crying myself. After that day, the grey silent days dragged on. The upcoming operation was supposed to solve all the problems, but it did not save Slava from death. That was the last time I saw him, on February 11th, 2010. He thanked me for my friendship for a long time and said that he would always be with me. I was very scared. I was losing him. He had not left his bed. He died last night. It's probably very difficult to imagine a teenager's longing for a dead friend. I tried to take my own life. I just couldn't die. But suddenly he started coming to me in a dream. Often. Still, we're talking to him. I'm with him. The Glory lives in me. It must be very strange to have a best friend in the other world. But at the same time, I understand that this should not be the case. I became even more withdrawn. For me, there is only fame. In my dream, he tells me that I have to find real friends. He gives me advice. He offered to pick me up. I want to live, so I refused. I can't let him go. What should I do? Really, no one has such problems. I can't let go. Because he's my favorite person. He was a man. So what? I can't. Once I was woken up by a strange noise in the hallway. I knew it. That this is Glory. I couldn't move, I couldn't see anything supernatural, but I knew that Glory was standing next to me. I know my story sounds implausible, but nevertheless it's true. I do not know where else to turn. You are welcome. Help. Thank you. One morning, children wake up in one camp and go to morning exercises, and then they see that a homeless man is sitting on the sports field under a basketball basket, leaning his back against an iron post. It sits and smells. Well, they began to swear at him. Of course, they drove him away. But the homeless man did not move. He turned out to be a dead homeless man. They called the ambulance, but they refused to pick up the smelly homeless man. They said to cope without them. Then the children decided, and the adults supported them, that they should bury the homeless themselves. By evening, the grave was dug. A pioneer bonfire was lit. Musicians gathered to perform a funeral march. The musicians were children who went to music school. Various instruments were assembled for them. There were 2 guitars, 1 drum, 1 trumpet, and 1 accordion. None of the musicians knew how to perform the funeral march. Then they decided to play something in the rap style. One boy came up with rapper poems about this homeless man. They say what a hard life this man had, that he couldn't stand it and broke down, started drinking vodka, and then sold his apartment, and then died, and that's good because he finally got rest and peace. The second verse was about the homeless man's childhood, about the fact that he too was once small and rested in camp, studied at school, but it did not help him, and now he finally got rest and peace. The musicians played a funeral rap. One boy, the author of poetry, performed rap, and one girl helped him, beautifully bringing out in the chorus, "Rest and rest." rest and rest, and rest, and rest, N-A, 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 N-A. All the viewers liked it very much. It turned out to be both beautiful and sad. When the song ended, they asked me to perform it again, and no one refused. The audience took out their phones and started shooting videos. When the song ended, they finally remembered about the homeless man. But it wasn't in the box that represented the coffin. The box itself was lying on its side. Either the homeless man himself woke up and ran away, or someone stole him for a laugh when everyone was listening to funeral rap. The homeless man was never found, and the funeral did not take place. One girl started crying. She was asked what's the matter. She said that she remembered that there is such a sign if the funeral did not take place, then it is very bad. Someone will die soon. And then all the children in the camp were seized with fear. A few days later, the children wake up in the morning and go to morning exercises. And then they see that a boy is hanging on a basketball basket, the one who composed the lyrics to the funeral rap. The boy's face is blue, his hands are tied behind his back, and there is a sign on his chest, "I'll show you rest and peace." Almost 3 weeks ago, in the evening, as usual, I was sitting at home watching a movie on my laptop. At some point, I put it down and went to the kitchen to get myself something to chew. On the way back, passing by the front door, I heard some indistinct sounds behind it. I put the food in the room, and then I went back to the door and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there, and the sounds died down. Most of all, they looked like a woman's crying, but still there were differences that seemed to be somehow muffled or something. In general, I thought that someone had passed, did not bother his head, went on to watch a movie. However, after about 10 minutes, I again distinguished some extraneous sounds. I paused the video player and began to listen. The sound source was definitely not from some neighboring apartment. Then I went back to the door to make sure, and yes, there was a shadow on the top landing. Actually, I wouldn't even have to worry, it's just that an unusual sound attracted my attention, and this time it reminded me more of some kind of singing than crying, but it's still quite difficult to describe. It seemed to me that ordinary drunks were standing in the entrance and perhaps listening to the radio. In general, it looks extremely stupid from the outside, but nevertheless, all this inconsistency and absurdity caused a little confusion even then. After the movie ended, my thoughts returned to those sounds again, even though they were no longer audible. I had explanations one was funnier than the other, and so I banished anxiety from myself. But the strangeness began that very night. I was awakened by a loud knock on the door. Naturally, I wasn't expecting anyone, and I immediately felt uneasy from this insistent sound. Confused, I turned on a small lamp and a TV for some reason. It always becomes less scary. The clock showed 3:02. I started to put on my pants, and at that moment the knocking stopped. I didn't even go to the door, went straight to the kitchen, drank some water, and went to bed only when it started to get light. The next day I had to go to the store. I packed up, took the money, and when I began to close the door behind me, I saw faintly distinguishable palm prints on it. This caused more mild annoyance than surprise. I decided to clean it when I got home. Then, when I started to wipe them off with a rag, I accidentally touched the prints and found that their surface was noticeably warmer than the surface of the door. I put my palm completely against the print and felt as if I was touching a real living hand. Then I came to my senses, quickly wiped off everything I could and went home. I couldn't find an explanation for this, but subconsciously I felt that I liked the warmth of the print, as if I received a little positive energy when touching it. I continued to go about my business, although thoughts about everything were spinning in my head and made it difficult to focus on anything. I couldn't sleep either. But that night, there were no sounds, no one knocked. Now, strange things started happening in the morning. I heard someone scratching at the door from outside, not very much, although it lasted for quite a long time, until I gathered the strength to get up and look through the peephole to see who was behind the door. As soon as I got close, the sound disappeared, and I didn't see anyone on the landing in front of the door. I didn't leave the house that day. Every time I passed by, I looked through the peephole hoping to see at least something, because I didn't even know what exactly I should expect to see. But so far nothing remarkable has been noticed, only occasionally passing residents of the house who, in turn, also did not find anything unusual and calmly passed by. Although once I did accidentally notice how a certain man, whom I do not know, stopped right on the landing, seemed to be thinking about something, looked back, held his head, and then continued up the stairs again. It seemed to me that he was already hurrying a little. It was late in the evening, and then I didn't sleep until late at night, but eventually fatigue took its toll, and I fell asleep. I was woken up by the sound of scratching at the door again. I lay under the covers for about a minute, but then I quickly got dressed and ran to the door. As before, the sound stopped immediately, and I didn't see anyone outside the peephole door. This time I left the apartment, looked up and down the flights of stairs, listened, but there didn't seem to be a soul in the entrance. Then I turned around and saw that palm prints had reappeared on the door, although in other places, but there were scratches on them, as if someone was trying to erase the image with some sharp object. Here it is necessary to explain the door in the apartment is ordinary, old, with a flat, hard surface. There is another one inside, but the lock on it has been broken for a long time and I do not use it. In addition, there is a very narrow gap between the frame of the door and the wall above. I quickly ran to get a rag, wiped off what I could again, and locked the door behind me. I walked around worried all day, and at 18 o'clock, when it was still light enough, I saw this through the peephole. A human shadow seemed to stand out clearly on the wall to the left, but there was no man himself or anything else that could give such a shadow. Even its very presence defied any laws. There were no light sources in the opposite direction. I looked at it for a few seconds. It stood motionless, and then, as if sensing someone else's gaze, it jerked, moved away to the window, and then quickly approached me, and immediately I felt a blow on the door. I jumped back, stunned, stood for a while, gathering my thoughts and spirit, tried to pull myself together and think soberly. Whatever it is, it can't get through the door. Although it remained a mystery how something intangible could interact with tangible things. Having prepared myself, I looked through the peephole again and saw the same thing. Something like a shadow was moving along the walls of the entrance. I watched it for a while longer. Then, still extremely scared, but still feeling safe, I went into the room and hopelessly searched the internet for descriptions of similar cases. Of course, more than 3/4 of all the articles were obvious inventions, other stories although remotely similar to the truth, but still I did not learn anything useful. Although I didn't really hope for it, I just couldn't think of anything better at that moment. All this time, I felt an oppressive feeling from the fact that right now there is something inexplicable and most likely evil a few meters away, right here behind the front door. I've never denied the existence of something paranormal, but I didn't expect to encounter something like this myself. For the next 2 weeks, I just stayed at home, eating what was left over from the last time. In my small town, I don't even have to think about delivering groceries via the internet, and I didn't want to endanger my parents, and I wouldn't want to explain why I can't go for food myself. Although I don't eat much, I never make large stocks, so the food began to come to an end. In addition, an unpleasant smell began to emanate from the trash can. I was also in a very poor physical condition, unable to fall asleep and get enough sleep due to constant stress. Every minute I thought only that one day I would have to open the door and meet what was waiting for me. The periodic knocks on the door further disturbed my mental balance. At the end of the week, this happened already at night. Once again, I was walking through the hallway and wanted to turn on the light there, but instead I just heard a pop and realized that the light bulb had burned out. This did not plunge the room into complete darkness, but now there was only a faint light coming from the window. Of course, this is not counting the lamps from the kitchen, toilet, and room. If you turn them on, then it became as bright as before. But at that very moment, it turned out that none of this was burning. At first, I didn't pay attention, went into the kitchen, put an empty plate there, and passing back, saw two shadowy hands reaching through the very crack on top of the doorway, slowly and as if searching for something that could open the door. Yes, I call it a shadow just conditionally, so that it would be easier to understand how it all looked. But by nature, this something had the opposite properties. It became more and more distinguishable in the dark. I rushed into the room, turned on the light there, and then quickly turned on all the other lamps. And only after that I saw the shadow turn pale, and those hands slowly crawl back. Immediately, I started rummaging through the nightstand in search of new light bulbs. I found 2 pieces, but unfortunately one of them was also damaged. The other one turned out to be new. I screwed it in instead of the burnout one, turned on the light, and did not turn off the light in the hallway at night. The following observation turned out to be important. I've already started to forget that it all started with that incomprehensible sound from the entrance, something between crying and a song, and again, don't take it literally, I just can't find the right words to convey it. One day, watching the shadows move through the peephole, I heard him again. Just at that moment, the shadow abruptly paled and then lost all shape, gradually spread over the entire wall and disappeared. Immediately, of course, watching the pleasant sight, I felt rested and refreshed. I wanted to listen to this harmonious sound over and over again. Anyway, he disappeared, and after a few hours, the shadows returned. I was not sure, but this case and those palm prints from which real warmth emanated gave me hope that among the other worldly entities there are not only those who seek to harm a person. So, all the food was gone. The constant presence of someone outside the door tired me. Lately, if you put your ear to the door, you could even clearly hear the words "let us," and the words were spoken in a whisper, but forcefully. It couldn't go on like this. I got dressed, took the money, and began to look through the peephole to wait until at least someone passed by, because at that time the shadows dispersed or hid. I waited a little, about 20 minutes. An elderly woman was walking down from above. Gathering my courage, I turned the key and opened the door. The woman saw me and looked at me strangely. I must have looked terrible. However, I don't need to get used to it. I closed the door and went downstairs. After going out into the fresh air and throwing out a garbage bag, at first I just took a walk, sat on a bench. Then I bought products in the store in much larger quantities than I usually took, hoping for a long time. Again, on my way home, I waited until one of the tenants came up. I quickly jumped up to my apartment, turned on the lights everywhere without closing the door, despite the sun outside the window, and locked the door. All the things were in their places. There were no strange marks anywhere. Everything seemed to be the same as when I left here. Even at night, there were no knocks, and I slept for quite a long time. The realization that I could stay here for a long time lifted my spirits, and there were no shadows behind the door yet. 3 days later, there was a knock on the door with the usual weak human knock. At first, I even thought it was one of the neighbors who came in with some kind of request, but no one answered my question and I didn't see anything through the peephole. Then a voice came loudly from behind the door, let us in too. When I was a kid, I really liked Super Mario 64. I remember playing it all the time at my aunt's. One day, when I was reviewing gameplay footage on YouTube, a window popped up. I was a little scared and wanted to close it, until I realized that the site offers one Super Mario 64 cartridge for sale. There was also a photo of the cartridge. Usually I don't trust such things, but this time nostalgia got the better of me, and I decided to buy this cartridge. The purchase process itself was a bit strange. The owner of the cartridge wanted the buyer to send him $10 to the address on the site instead of using PayPal. Even more strange, it seemed that when I experienced problems with the game and wanted to visit this site again, I wrote down its address. The page I needed was nowhere to be found. A few days after I sent the $10, I received a package containing a new copy of the game. The first thing I noticed when I opened the package was that the official sticker with Mario had apparently been peeled off. At this point, Mario was written on a piece of duct tape with a permanent marker. I felt a little uneasy, but as long as the game was working, I didn't care. I took out my Nintendo 64 and inserted the cartridge into the console. The screen turned on, and a familiar image of Mario's face appeared on it, which you can twist and stretch as much as you want. I remember when I was a kid, I always laughed at the results that came out in the end and decided to try it. I moved the cursor to Mario's ear and shaped it like an elf. I was about to do the same with my other ear when suddenly the TV started making a harsh noise. Mario's head began to distort in proportions and directions that I didn't even consider possible for a model. The sounds from the game were randomly played over static noise. At the time when all this was happening, I heard a faint whisper in Japanese. The voice began to stutter and sob. I immediately turned off the game and turned it on again. I didn't trust Mario's head anymore. I just chose a new game. When I started, the game missed the opening monologue of the princess, and the courtyard is outside. Mario found himself right inside the castle. Still scary, Bowser didn't say anything. I tried to ignore it all and keep playing. I also noticed that there was no music in the game, just dead silence. There were still no Toads around to talk to. The only door I could go through was Bob on Battlefield. The other doors simply did not respond to my commands. The portrait of Bob on Battlefield was unusual. It was a completely white picture. I was still trying to convince myself that these were all minor glitches, and they wouldn't affect the gameplay in any way. As soon as I entered the portrait, the image changed from completely black to the image of the lethal lava canvas. You know, those few disturbing images of flames with an unkind smile. Yes, after that I realized that something very strange was going on. The mission selection menu appeared, and I noticed another strange detail. Instead of Big Bob-omb on the summit, the mission was called Turn Back. I do not know what made me click on yes, but I did it. The level looked normal. It was just as I remembered. I thought that now I can enjoy the game of my childhood. But then I saw him. Luigi. I was just blown away. He was never in this game. His model was not a Mario model with a modified palette. It looked like a completely original model. Luigi just stood there until I tried to approach him. He started running away from me at an incredible speed. I followed him. All sorts of strange things happened while I was chasing him. Every time I picked up a coin, the music and enemies became slower and the level became darker and more disgusting to look at. The level continued to gradually deteriorate until I picked up the 5th coin. After that, the music just stopped. The enemies lay down on the ground as if they were dead. I was scared out of my mind, but I continued to chase Luigi. I went uphill. There were no rolling balls trying to knock me down. I wasn't even surprised anymore. Luigi was always only in my field of vision because I just couldn't catch up with him. When I climbed to the top, I saw another object that was out of place. A small house is all that was on top of the mountain. Luigi was nowhere to be seen. The house looked very strange for Mario series games. He was old, ugly, and completely ruined. Having given up on my own at this moment, I went into the house. As soon as the door slammed shut, an alarming painting of Luigi hanging immediately popped up, with a very scary, frightening chord. It sounded like the screeching of a violin accompanied by frenzied piano hammering. Mario fell to his knees and sobbed for about 5 minutes, after which the image on the screen slowly disappeared. I returned to the castle. Mario simply fell out of the picture. The image went from a picture of the lethal lava land level to an image of Luigi hanging himself. This time the room on the level was different. Now it was something like a small hall. Toads with blank expressions and white robes lined up along one side of the hall. There was a picture on the opposite end that completely scared me and knocked me out. It was a picture of my family. This was not a photo from the time of the release of Super Mario 64. It was a very, very recent photo. I remember posing for her last weekend. I tried to turn off my N64, and it was clear that I would not play this. However, despite the fact that I turned off the console, the game remained on the screen. I kept flipping the switch back and forth, but nothing happened. I tried to disconnect the set-top box from the TV, but that didn't help either. I could still control Mario. I couldn't leave the whole thing as it is, so I continued to play. I went back to the photo of my family and jumped into it. Of course, there was only one mission available. It was called Run, Don't Walk. I chose her. Let's go. The level started with a flooded corridor with platforms floating in the water. Mario landed on one of them, and the camera turned around to show what was happening behind. A silent, black void was slowly approaching Mario. She didn't look like anything. It didn't even look like a finished graphic. Just a giant black bubble. I started jumping from platform to platform. Without any purpose, I kept running the darkness slowly but surely gaining speed. All this happened, as it seemed to me, for several hours. I doubted if there would be any end to it at all. Mario just seemed to be running around in circles. Finally, this black something caught Mario and swallowed him into its darkness. Mario did not scream, did not resist, it just consumed it. Mario fell out of the painting and returned to the castle. I lost one of my 3 lives. The room was a little different now. Some of the toads disappeared and the image was slightly different from the previous one. My family and I were in the same positions, but our bodies partially decomposed. It looked too real to be a photo jab. It looked like someone had taken our dead bodies and put them in the right positions. Having given up on everything, I jumped into this picture again. Mario was in a small room. There was still only one mission available. It was called I'm Right Here. I chose this mission and prepared for the worst. Mario landed in a small dark room. There wasn't a damn thing in sight. The room was empty except for the piano in the corner. I knew it. What does it mean? I'm stuck here with Mad Piano. I came up and it started chasing me as usual. I did not know how to damage him, so let Mario get damaged. When Mario lost all his health, the usual death animation did not appear. Mario was just crushed by this piano. He fell into his blood and guts, which fell apart on the floor, and the camera showed his corpse from above. A distorted version of the merry-go-round from Big Boo's Haunt was played as the screen slowly transitioned from a game drawing to a photorealistic drawing of Mario's corpse in the same position as in the game. It was very disturbing. I cried quietly while looking at the image. I've lost another life. The photo of my family appeared again. We were even more rotten than before. The view came closer to the picture, as if I was moving to the level again. I was greeted by an image of the princess's castle outside. The castle was completely destroyed. The ground around was on fire. The sky was very black. Bowser's laughter was constantly played in a circle against the background of mocking children's cries of "You could never have saved her." This went on for a very long time, until a close-up image of the princess's face appeared, accompanied by a sudden endless screeching. The princess's mouth was wide open, as if she was screaming, and instead of her eyes there were empty, black holes. Suddenly I was back in the hall where Mario usually falls out. Now all the toads were gone, and my family and I looked completely repulsive. Maggots were spilling out of holes in our flesh. The guts were hanging out of our bodies. My father's eye had fallen out of its socket and was hanging in the air. It was already too unbearable, but something made me continue. I jumped into the painting with my last remaining life. This time. The mission had no name, just an empty space instead of a name. I chose a mission, and Mario ended up on a small island in the middle of the ocean. There was a lonely sign there. It only said dive on it. There was no choice. I went into the water. The ocean was dark and empty. There wasn't even a fish. I didn't see anything in the water at all, except Mario. I swam down. I've been swimming for quite a long time, but it seems Mario didn't even think about suffocating. I swam down for about 10 minutes until I decided to come back. As soon as I turned Mario back around, it appeared A huge, really huge Unagi the eel appeared out of nowhere and swallowed Mario whole. I was stunned. Everything happened so fast that I'm not even sure what I saw. The game over screen never appeared. All I saw was a disappearing screen. The photo of me and my family appeared on the screen again. This time we were just skeletons. As before, they looked very real. I couldn't move the camera, she just stayed focused on that picture. I turned off the game and turned it back on. I chose my own preservation, but I returned to these skeletons again. I did this 3 times until I got tired of it. I desperately wanted to stop, but some unknown force prevented me from doing so. I decided to choose another safe. The camera focused on the picture with the skeletons again, but this time they were in a different position. It looked like it was someone else's family. It was like this. In Moscow, between the airport and center stations right on the shore, there is a large Aviasy shopping center. There are many offices there, for example. I came to pick up the print ordered for the editorial office. I took the seal away while I needed it. I must say that I know this building very well. Now, the bus station occupies only one wing there, and before everything there was an airport terminal. Therefore, the toilet there is still hefty. Moreover, of the most primitive type, there are a couple of steps in the stall. And on this pedestal, a typical Russian toilet, a hole in the floor. All this is located on the underground floor, so I generally have a suspicion that most of the visitors do not know about this free toilet. I went in there all alone, went to the booth. I finished my business and, buttoning my jeans, stood up to my full height. I must say that only tall people can look over the door in such toilets. Fortunately, or maybe on the contrary, unfortunately, I am just tall. I saw that there was also a man standing in front of me in the booth. It would seem, what's the big deal? But I immediately felt uneasy. Because usually when you accidentally run into someone in such places of solitude, you immediately look away. And this one was looking right at me, and so intently as if he was waiting for me to raise my head. Furthermore, I saw only the upper half of the man's head, and somehow it was disproportionately small for such a tall stature. Well, in general, he looked at me unpleasantly somehow. And his eyes were strange, you know, like painted ones too, even in shape, such big ones. Well, to hell with him, I thought. There are a few abnormal people that he will do to me alone. But then I realized one detail that made me sweat instantly. No one could enter the booth in front of me, because they don't work. Each one is closed with a lock, and a protective ribbon is tied on top. And then, the toilet visitor began to gnaw on the door of his stall. It looked as if someone was hanging on the door by one upper jaw. His teeth were quite ordinary human, but it didn't make it any easier. I stood rooted to the spot and didn't know what to do. Get out. Well, no, I know such a turn from horror movies. I'll go down the stairs, break eye contact, open the door, and it's already right in front of me. Call for help? No one will hear. I have already described the location of the toilet. It's a 20-minute walk from my house to the shopping center. I live with friends. Maybe I should call them. They say, Sanya, I'm standing in the Aviasity toilet. A strange man is gnawing at the door in the booth opposite. Come with an axe. I repent. I'm a sinner. I already chose the last option. Except the phone was in the backpack, and the backpack was right next to the door. It turned out that it was necessary to go down this way. I went down and got my backpack, and I saw feet in the gap between the door and the floor. Ordinary human feet, short, either female or even children's, and something creaked right above my head. I raised my head. My God, what a face that was. Not a face, but a papier-mâché mask. It was semicircular, too flat for a normal human head, hair like a glued wig, flat eyes and nose painted, teeth maybe just like real ones. And I couldn't let go of the disgusting feeling that it was all alive anyway. What saved me was that I am Russian, not American. The Russian's first reaction to a scary creature is to scream and throw something at it. I swore in a way that Lieutenant Rozhevsky would have appreciated and threw a backpack in that face. Then he hit the door, not even opening it, but taking off the latch, fell out. And nothing. Quiet, empty, my backpack is lying around. Hugging him like a baby, I ran upstairs. I flew to the motorcycle dealership, scared the consultant, ran outside. I don't know what to do now. Of course, I didn't tell my family and friends about this case. It doesn't work out to forget either. Many of my friends go to this shopping center who goes for something, girlfriends, for example, to a fabric store sometimes. I think it is clear that they will tell me in response to the warning, do not go to the Aviasity toilet. There is a strange creature hanging with its jaw on the doors of the cabins. You can, of course, do nothing in the end. It seems like no one was hurt. The trouble is, I do not know if this is the case. The nightmares of my early childhood have returned to me for 2 nights now. In them, I run away from a rather nasty-looking creature that comes out of the wall, appearing like a drawing. And the case there invariably takes place in the building of this very airport terminal. As a child, I could wake up and run crying to my mom, dad, or grandparents. But my parents now live on the other side of Moscow and my grandparents the kingdom of heaven. I'll have to do it myself somehow. I wish I knew how. It's 5:35 a.m. But I've been awake for a long time. I'm just lying on the bed. My parents are here too. They're looking at me. And I can only look away, trying my best not to scream in horror. It smells strongly of blood. Freshly spilled blood. Damn it, I'm scared, God. Here, there is something. Something. And as soon as I let him know that I'm awake, I'm going to be finished. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And no one will come to help. I've already thought about how I can be saved. The only way out is to run. Run as hard as you can into the street. Screaming, calling for help. I hope that at least someone will hear me, the neighbors, anyone. The chances are slim, but if I stay here, I'll probably die. It's waiting. Waiting for me to wake up. Waiting for me to see his masterpiece. But I need to start from the beginning. About 3 hours ago, I woke up to screams. They were shouting at home. Here, I got up and went to check what happened. Now I understand that then it could have killed me at any moment, but it didn't. The carpet in the hallway was covered in blood. I turned around and ran to my room, shaking with terror, and hid under the covers. I tried to fall asleep again, telling myself that it was all just a dream, just a terrible dream. Then I heard the door of my room open. I sneaked out from under the covers, feeling like I was scared to death by a 5-year-old boy. I saw something dragging my parents' bodies into the room. And it wasn't human. It wasn't human. Something naked, eyeless and hairless with the gait of a caveman, huddled under the weight of his mother and father. But this something was smarter than any caveman. And it knew what it was doing. It sat my father down on the floor, leaning against the bed, and turned his head to face me. It put my mother on a chair, as well as my father, facing me. Then it began to rub its palms against the wall, drawing a pentagram in a circle with blood. The creature went all out, painting this masterpiece. Finally, she wrote something on the wall, some kind of inscription, but it was too dark, I couldn't read it. And now this thing is sitting under my bed and waiting. I'm scared. How so? How so? My eyes got used to the darkness. Now I can read what it says, but I don't want to, because even just thinking about it is a real nightmare. But I feel like I have to see it before he died. And I'm watching. I know you ache. 2005 was firmly marked in my memory by two significant events. Firstly, I turned 20 years old and my dear parents reluctantly recognized the fact of the fledgling's plumage and therefore allowed me to leave the family nest. Which I did immediately, moving from my loving ancestors to an empty granny God rest her soul apartment, which however is 2 steps away from my father's house. And also, in order to finally consolidate my adult position in the eyes of the public, I resolutely invited my boyfriend to share both food and bed with me in the new monastery. Then, as written, they began to live and live. So, having spent the whole summer in this way, my friend and I were preparing to meet Autumn. He was a businessman, studied at the Institute, and in his spare time he worked part-time as an artistic metalworker, and even received a penny for his work. I, on the other hand, supported myself with freelance meager pennies, kept the fire burning in the family hearth, and on the occasion of the holidays waited for my beloved either at home or in the yard, hanging out with young mother's childhood friends in combination. On one of these waiting evenings at the very sunset of summer, the second of the events occurred, thanks to which I can safely say that 2005 will not be erased from my memory until the very grey hairs before the first attacks of senility for a very, very long time. So the mise-en scene, I am with my companions in close proximity to the house. The named spouse is working forging something for lovers of beauty. It's about evening, my dear, he calls and informs me that. They say he is in such and such an area of the city, on his way home. I say goodbye to my friends, wander into the store for bread, and slowly move towards my native square meters. I go up to the floor, unlock the door, and start in surprise when, as if waiting for my appearance on the horizon, the intercom starts to yell with a bravura alarm. I pick up the phone. It's me. I press the button, wondering to myself at the speed of my dear friend's arrival. But these thoughts quickly disappear and more prosaic thoughts come to the fore, that dinner should be warmed sooner, hands should be washed, a couple of cutlets were still left from yesterday, etc. Anyway, I rode off to the kitchen. I hear my Dinas came in, slammed the door, shouted at him, trying to shout over the noise of the water that they say, undress and wait a couple of minutes. He muttered something unintelligible. Well, okay, I set the table, I call him. He's silent. I'm going to look for him in the gym for sure. I think the computer turned on, put on headphones and is shooting, jamming into another shooting game. I'm walking down the hallway, so he's here like a shadow emerging from a dark bathroom. Scared me, damn it. Then, like the girl Alice, more and more wonderful events. A friend sat down at the table, out of sight, with a spoon listlessly in his plate, and is silent, the most important thing. Knowing that Dinos's appetite and desire to tell in detail his whole day disappears only in case of disasters on an almost planetary scale, I naturally worry and actively ask my beloved about the causes of such stupor. He just shakes his head like a Chinese dummy, and he also glares at me from under his forehead, maliciously, contemptuously. It's like I've done something wrong to him, but it's not that simple, but in general, it's terrible what I've done. And so, this misunderstanding of behavior makes me sad and dreary in my soul, sad even if a wolf howls. I don't know why I reacted so sharply, maybe because before that we always talked about everything openly, but here, a blank wall, for no apparent reason. We had dinner in deathly silence, and I decided to leave attempts to establish a dialogue until better times. We moved into the hall afterwards, turned on the TV, pretending to be passionate about watching. He sat down next to me, as if he had swallowed a steak, crossed his arms over his chest and continued to burn me with his gaze. And I don't goo-goo, I just feel that the smell from the cute is not good, not very tart, but distinct, moldy rotten of some kind. Then I couldn't stand it, and I told him, they say, stop drilling holes in me with your eyes, better go wash up, get off work anyway. He kind of caught himself here. Does it smell like that? I'm going to smoke, and then wash up, he says. He gets up, took a cigarette, and went to the toilet. I'm sitting there, my mood is not to hell, my soul is gloomy. I'm thinking what kind of fly has bitten Dan and how to proceed. So having gone deep into my thoughts, I sat for probably 30 minutes. In the TV room, one dumb sitcom was replaced by another, and Dan doesn't show his nose from the toilet and is generally quiet there. Not a single sound is heard. Are you alive there, smoker? I get up from the sofa, go to the bathroom. My nerves are compressed into a tight spring. In response, silence. I crumple in front of the toilet door, put my ear to it, pull the handle. The door is locked. I'm really getting uneasy. I'm pulling the door without hesitation. I'm yelling something like, hey, okay, open it. But that's just the point. The latch is strong, and there is silence on the other side too. And I don't know what to think. I'm breaking down like the NKVD in the old days. The hysterics were interrupted by the same alarm on the intercom. Thinking that whoever brought it there, even a pizza delivery guy, even a stray pussy, I'll run out, grab an armful and they'll help me break down the door here. I rush headlong to the cherished device. But there was a voice on the phone that I didn't expect to hear in any ways. I open up soon. It's me, my beloved. I won't call him from the toilet, but he will. Here he is, taking the elevator up. Needless to say, I was waiting for Denisov's second arrival in the stairwell in a semi-fainting state. Deniska, jumping out of the elevator, began to violently describe the reasons for such a long journey, checking the time on his mobile phone from his last call later. I realized that he had been driving for almost 2 hours while I was feeding dinner and trying to engage in conversation, something in the guise of a loved one, but stopped when he saw my pale and pathetic view. It was difficult to understand my convulsive and confused babble, but Dan, the clever one, caught the essence and, tearing out the latch with me, opened the toilet door. The closet was empty and only a Faience friend stared at us from there with obvious bewilderment. That's the whole story, in the form of a small afterword. I'll add, then I couldn't explain to Dinos what really happened. He just realized that someone had come in and disappeared somewhere in our toilet, and I was scared to hiccups. Every time he tried to clarify the situation, he saw the desperate horror crumpling my face and soon gave up trying, probably putting together some kind of his own digestible version of what happened. After that, we lived with him for another 1.5 years in relative harmony and peace, and then he disappeared. He just left in the morning on his own business and did not return as usual in the evening. The phone was turned off. The application to the authorities with subsequent searches did not yield results. He is still missing to this day. Today is Friday, the 13th. I do not like this Black Friday, although I do not believe in the mystical power of this day. I'm going home from school. The mood is bad, and the weather is not a fart rain slush. And as luck would have it, I forgot the umbrella, and the rain has already turned into a downpour. I plugged the player into my ears and turned on the first song I came across. She turned out to be kind of sad, but come on. The mascara was all leaking, and some idiot almost pinned me down on his ladder. It's like some kind of setup. But now I'm home. There is no one. There is nothing to do. Tomorrow is a day off. I am too lazy to do my homework, so I climbed with my feet on an old armchair and covered myself with a blanket. I turned on some lousy movie and fell asleep. I woke up in half an hour at most. The lights were off and the TV was off too, although I remember for sure that I turned on the light and the movie was also running for 2 or 3 hours. It became scary. I wanted to get up, but at the same moment someone leaned on me. Who is this? Maybe a brother. But he's on Steam. Mum should be here by now though. I calmed down, but I couldn't get up. Mom! Stop it. This something let me go, but immediately began to strangle me, so much so I started to choke. Tears rolled down, and I finally realized that it was something unidentified, that it couldn't be someone from my family or friends. I began to struggle desperately and say a prayer. But prayer did not help, rather the opposite. This thing came down on me again and started literally tearing chunks of meat off me. Oh my god, you have no idea how much it hurts. I was already choking on tears, but finally this something receded and I was finally able to break free. She groped for her cell phone somewhere on the floor, but instead she touched someone's cold hand. Something started to choke me again. Hooray, it's a phone. Now I can at least see something. I shone the light on the sofa and, no, not her. My mother was lying on the couch, covered in blood. Suddenly I heard a terrible roar, and that's it. This is the end. Did you have any anxiety when you were near the mirror at night? Today we will talk about superstitions and try to explain to you why it is not advisable to look in the mirror at night and where all this came from. Ancient Slavic legends said that at night a mirror becomes a door to the other world, in which darkness rules and where the souls of dead people go. That's why all mirrors are usually covered with a cloth in a house with a deceased person, so that the mirror does not absorb the soul that is passing into another world. It is not known for sure whether this is true or not, but still it is not recommended to look in the mirror when it began to get dark outside. It is believed that mirrors reflecting the world around them and the faces of people for decades can preserve the images of the latter. Popular rumor says that if you look at your reflection at night, you can accidentally see evil spirits or look beyond our world. It is not advisable to look into the reflection of a mirror by candlelight as well as from 12 to 3 a.m. since this time is called the Devil's Hour, during which the devil and various evil spirits can be seen in the reflection. You can't guess in front of the mirror either. At least in the dark, it's easier to go crazy in front of a mirror than to wait for Satan. Despite the fact that many superstitions are associated with mirrors, many people treat such things with humor, and this is right because if you believe everything in a row, you can lose your mind. It's up to you to believe or not.